Hey, it's Trinel.
Hey y'all, it's Chera, and you're listening to Becoming the Vision, and you're listening to Trinel and me. Hey, it's
Hey,
fun to be
Shara.
here in this space together and to have some time to kind of reflect, debrief, and talk aloud about where we're headed in this work.
And we've been deep in the work. We've been in the field getting some insights around how we make change happen, deep and lasting change happen, and how we start.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very much embodied in lived work, and we're sharing it in real time, guys.
Yeah, very much so. And so today we're going to talk about faith, but not the kind of faith that is about a religious doctrine, but faith as in belief in what is unseen, but we just know and trust, believe that it can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, this takes us all the way back to the origins of our work together, right? And coming into a place of curiosity and believing that, one, when you have a real question, you don't need anybody to tell you that it's okay to have your question or your question is worthy. Your question is your question, like, period, dot, done. And we started this work with real questions about what it is and how it is that our leaders of color, in particular, working in this wealthy industry of philanthropy, like, why are they really there? Like, for what? What's the end? No, not what your organization says. I don't want to hear your mission statement, right? Please don't tell me your organizational values. Thank you. And respect to those, but like, no, why are you there? What are you there to do? You know, whose child are you? Who are your people? And how does that help you know why you are, where you are, and what you're there to do? And then how are you embodying that? How are you living it? How are you practicing it? And so on. And believing that people have the capacities to connect with those kinds of questions, connect with something deeper than what is written in any organizational statement could ever. And that we actually need to get into that in order to
Yeah.
move really toward racial justice and collective liberation.
And we should say that the assumption is that that's important
Mm-hmm.
for getting to the future that we all deserve, right? I
That's
think
right.
that part of the question too is how could a sector that's relatively insulated,
Mm-hmm.
that has values,
Yep.
right, that are supportive of justice and change,
Mm-hmm.
and good in the world,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always quite hit the mark,
That's
right?
right.
Why does sometimes crisis create the conditions for steps toward real change,
Mm-hmm.
to become actionable
Yes.
in the
Mm-hmm.
sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how can
Mm-hmm.
we make those postures in moments of crisis
Mm-hmm.
more available to us
That's right.
every day, right? In our organizations, I'm thinking back to 2020,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
and the shifts in the sector
Mm-hmm.
around equity and
Mm-hmm.
such,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And why didn't they last,
Why didn't they last?
right?
Why so much backlash, backtracking, kickback? What is that word? Yeah, backsliding.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Was it ever real?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was real. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it was real.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question is, how do we sustain and
Mm-hmm.
prepare ourselves for that change, right? The
Mm-hmm.
energy of the moment
Yeah.
fuels a lot of what we're able to do, I think, in our work and in our organizations in those moments of crisis. But that energy eventually goes away, right? And there needs to be something internal that sustains it. And I think so much of our work is not so much telling people what to do in that moment, but how to prepare before that moment comes. So that moment's just another of many that you've created yourself through your practice, right? So
but is there I'm still struck though. Is there a crisis of faith happening in the philanthropic sector itself?
I think so. I think there's a crisis of faith that is very much obscuring our agency in a way, right? I tie faith and agency together, right? Because faith is what makes agency actionable when you don't really know what's happening or what's going to happen.
I think that's right. And I think there is a crisis of faith, right? In the sense, like, how could it be that in 2020 we have this worldwide uprising for racial justice, right? After George Floyd is murdered in broad daylight in the Twin Cities, right? May he rest in peace. And then 2 years later, folks are like, wait, what's happening? So now we can't talk about race. We can't talk about blackness. We can't talk about justice anymore. And then, 2026, we already know. How could that be? I have watched some in the sector go to 2025 this year. Oh, but we are so small in the face of government. Oh, but we are so small, we can't do everything, making themselves small. Where in 2020, in 2021, there's hardly a philanthropic organization that, regardless of how whatever the endowment size or pooled fund, intermediary, didn't put a statement out saying, this is where we stand for, this is who we are, we're going to redouble our commitment. So nobody had an issue, right, coming to the table in 2020, 2021. It was like a scurry to get the statements out, to get the commitments, like, what are we doing? And 2025, 2026, it's, oh, but our budgets are so small, but we're just, there's just so much we can't do. Faith, right? That's to me, where is your faith? Where is your faith that actually what you can do, you must? And beyond that, we trust that we're going in the direction of, like, how quickly we go from everybody on board in this way to so many falling off over here.
Yeah. Well, I think that part of the issue is one you always bring up is that the arc is long, right?
It's very long.
And those moments of crisis create this intensity of action, this possibility, and then maybe the reality of the time that it takes comes to the fore. And
if you say that Black Lives Matter, that's not meant to be for 6 months.
But how do you deal with the everyday disappointments along the way, right? And I think that's why faith. This is why faith.
Yeah, that's because we've been dealing with them for over 400 years. If you say Black Lives Matter, you know what? You're going to have to be okay with or get okay with being uncomfortable, having some disappointments. You know what? My parents were disappointed too that they couldn't drive in much of the area where they lived in Virginia after dark. But if you say Black Lives Matter, we should be able to look each other in the eye and, and share the truth of what that experience really is. And so,
And I one thing I'm encouraged by, so we know all the difficulties and we know all the mess and the circumstances that lead to the mess, right? And the crises. And what I'm encouraged by is that there seems to be in the sector a growing understanding that we need something else. We got to bring something else in, right?
True.
our colleagues like Norma Wong, for example, when no thing works, right? You know, we have to bring in something new. And I think this faith conversation is very much a part of what is being brought to bear on our problems, on our tensions and our contradictions. And so I think it's very fruitful for us to be meeting in that place, because there's a sense that people need a grounding in the for now, right? People need a grounding, right? And a practice of something that enables them to see this thing far off in the distance, and not quite be able to touch it yet, but still do all the things needed to kind of get there, still laying those tiles right down, and knowing maybe that your son might have to pick up the ground laying after you, or that this is going to be generational work. I think definitely. That's what we're reaching for.
And I think you're right, and it's an interesting, I come back to the industry itself, philanthropy as an industry or sector. Some people prefer the language of sector. And so whether it's a sector or an industry or both or somewhere in between or neither, it is happening again, because we've been here before, that part of the invitation to evolution has to come or is coming from outside it, right? So there is, and there are, and they're growing. The knock is growing louder. In this case, the knock is outside the door of the industry, of the sector. The knock is growing louder. And that knock is really inviting people and organizations to be more embodied, more connected to whatever that inner work is and is about as they move forward, as they go forth. Because as you said, and Norma has said, when no thing works, then what? Then what?
And we've been hearing about faith in this work for a while now, right?
We have been.
I'm thinking back to our conversation with Dr. Ross.
Yes. Dr. Ross, it's a memorable conversation, definitely a real touchstone for both of us. And I think a lot about how he said, that he used to think of philanthropy as the work being strategic and primarily strategic. And now, and as he was retiring from the California Endowment, he understands it as deeply spiritual, maybe even profoundly spiritual. And, he talks about his own faith walk and his practice of going to listen to the prayers and sometimes praying with the women, mostly brown, black, women of color, often immigrants in Los Angeles in the church midday. And it makes me wonder, and I think I've said this before, like, how do we quicken the path? Right? How do you quicken the path? How do you not have to be at the end of a storied career in the philanthropic sector to surprise, reveal, this work is deeply spiritual, and in fact, I have inner practices, I have a spiritual belief system, and that fuels me in my work. Like, do we just have to wait, Trinel, for like a great socio-cultural change in the philanthropic sector where people could say that? Or do you have to wait until you're graduating/retiring? Like, what's that about?
There's a lot of these fake rules, that folks have about when you can bring more of that which is grounding you, supporting you publicly out into the world. I think there's also a growing conversation about how to talk about faith in public. Thinking about Krista Tippett's work, right? And I think
Lucas Johnson. Shout out to Lucas.
Well. Yeah. And I think we're learning, right? I think we're allowed to be in that learning as well. And I was happy to hear, at least from Dr. Ross, how that's showing up now, and the fact that it's showing up at all. I think, too, that we also talked about faith in the context of the conversation with June Wilson as well.
That's right.
And what I loved about her conception of faith and the role it plays in her work is that it actually gives her freedom to explore.
That's right.
And experiment.
That's right.
Without harm, without sense of harm or fear of harm, right? And in her work, of course, harm is ever present, right? When you're working across racial lines and you're talking about reparations, right? And repair. And so...
cross race and cross class.
Oh, yeah. Of course, right? And so we're embracing faith, y'all, here at Freedom Dreams.
Yes.
We've been doing it for a while, and it's part of how we think we get to what's possible.
And it's really been here, you know, from really early on in our work, right? When we first conducted the research interviews that laid the groundwork for Freedom Dreams and Philanthropy, we heard it over and again, right, about the ways that people really find their way to an embodied and courageous kind of leadership, and the kinds of like rituals, practices, the ways that people go deeper and how people even access that, right? And so I feels like, if anything, we're choosing now a posture of speaking on that and learning to, right? Yeah. And exploring it. I mean, I can remember, Trinel, when we first met, working at MDRC in New York City and being told by one of the senior executives there that it was very interesting that I'm a person of faith, because usually people of faith don't work there. And so I should really think about what I'm going to do with that, knowing that I now work here, that I am a person who believes in God, and that I work at a place where people kind of poo-poo that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why some folks got to wait 25 years into their career to
right?
talk about
you
it.
know?
And I think, too, part of the issue, too, is that there's a tendency to be all or nothing about which faith we center, and I think the conversation about faith will have to be more encompassing and less reducible to any one religion in order for folks to feel they have the agency to
That's
really
a
speak.
Very nice way of saying that. For me, when people read me in that organization, they were like, girl, well, not even girl, but they were looking at me and saying, oh, if you are a person of faith, if you believe in God, I'm looking at you as a Black woman, then that must mean you're closed-minded, transphobic, homophobic, and, and make no space for anybody's identity other than your own. And I think that, unfortunately, deeply unfortunately, white American evangelism has given a lot of us a bad rap. I do think that there are also a lot of Black churches that do uphold transphobia, homophobia, and a whole lot of patriarchy. So I get it on that level. On the other hand, I really would hope that we're coming to a place where people can bring their faith, their inner work, their spirituality, and the sense of how that supports them in being embodied and courageous leaders into the room. Like, my gosh, if we are holding back who we are and holding back our ways of connecting with our courage, ways of connecting with what grounds us, like, y'all, we're in for some deep shit. Like, for real. Like, how are we ever going to get free if part of a person's, like, practice, what actually allows them to show up and continue to work on themselves and continue to be who they need to be and who they're becoming, if we're saying, like, yeah, nah, like at the place where you're spending 8, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.